We've got less than a minute to go.
Less than a minute. We'll wait to call to order at 3.
And I just got a message from April. We're live.
We are live.
Thank you, April.
All right. And it's 3 p.m. So I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting of the HRA Board to order. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. Let the record show that Bill Gabler is excused. He's absent today, and he's excused. And the next thing is introductions. So let's start with Chris O'Brien.
Chris O'Brien, HRA board member, Grand Marais, full-time resident since 2015, part-time resident since about 2006 or so, but and had a career in the solar energy business, and I'm happy to be here.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank
Very
you.
good. James Yorkie, not an HRA board member, but I am the county administrator and a relative newcomer to Cook County. We've been here for going on a year and a half.
Oh, you've already wintered over once.
Yeah, people don't say how many years they've been here, they say how many winters they've been here.
I'm Mary Somnus, HRA board member, representing Commissioner District 3, I think it is.
Say on your.
And you are? I don't know.
I'm Chris Skildum. I'm on the HRA board, and I'm District 2. Been in the community most of my life. Live here, resident, have family here, and I will probably be here for a long time. I've got some pretty deep roots, so yeah.
I'm Lawrence Doe from Hoveland. My wife and I are full-time residents up that way, HRA board member.
I'm Stacy Hawkins, the Cook County Commissioner from District 2, that is the representative. I am not a voting member on the HRA, but I am the board-appointed member to attend these meetings.
And I'm Ann Sullivan, and I am the alternate commissioner, so in case Commissioner Hawkins is unavailable to attend, I will always be here and try to be here as much as I possibly can anyway.
Thank you. And we have a guest joining us today. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Beth Drost, Executive Director of the Cook County Grand Marais Economic Development Authority. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Next on the agenda is the approval of the January minutes. Does anybody have any comments or motion?
I'll move to approve. I thought they were clear.
I just have one
No.
question before we move on. On the one aspect of when we were talking about the, where was that? Oh, I'm sorry, that was in the, oh no, that was part of the where it says, any request for the HR board needs to be approved by the EDA board. Is that because any training that we have would come from the, so if we wanted the state organization to do some training, we'd have to have the HRA board, the EDA board approve that. But if we got training from other sources, would we still need EDA's approval?
It's just the MOA is between the EDA
Right.
and Minnesota Housing Partnership.
And that's why we would need
So-
approval from
Right.
them.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if we had training from another source,
Right.
Yeah, the HRA is free to do whatever
Okay.
it wants to do independent of EDA and MHP.
okay.
But that relationship is governed by that MOA.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. All right, thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
So Chris made a motion to approve the minutes of the January 16th meeting. Is there a second?
I would second it.
Second by Lawrence. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Next up is an update on the executive director recruitment process.
Yes, and I just wanted to, for the record, kind of let folks know where we are. in the process. As a reminder, we did receive 12 applications for the position of executive director. This board, and including Commissioners Hawkins and Sullivan, myself, and then also Beth Drost from the EDA. Thank you, Beth, for your assistance in reviewing those applications. Based on the scoring, we selected 3 candidates to interview for the position, and they will be interviewed this Friday morning, February 18th. So very excited to get that process underway. And following that, we'll likely have, I'm not sure exactly how things are going to move forward, and I think that's going to be up to the board really to decide, but depending on how those first interviews go, we may bring back one or more of those applicants for interviews with the full board. So, and those would be public, so.
Because the full board would be present, there would be
Because it would be an
quorum.
open meeting,
Yep.
correct.
So we'll just have to get back to everybody sometime after Friday morning. We are Zooming those interviews, and I would probably guess that after the third interview, I don't know if everybody would have time to stay on for a few minutes after for us to talk amongst ourselves after the candidates have left the Zoom room.
This is after Friday's interviews?
This is, right, Friday
For
morning.
the people who
For
are.
the people that are on
The
the call.
people that are
Okay,
doing the
okay,
first
got it.
round,
Yep.
yeah. Does that, Ann, can you, James, yeah?
I think, Friday's really jammed up, but yes.
Madam Chair, I'm planning to go to the cities after the meeting, so
Okay.
hopefully it's not 2 hours after the.
Oh, no, I don't think we shouldn't have to talk about it that long. Hopefully it'll be, wouldn't it be magical if it was just all clear and
Yeah.
simple?
I have something that follows immediately after that second block of time, but I can stay on for a while.
Just for
Yeah.
10, 15 minutes or something,
Yep.
something.
Not a problem.
Okay.
So what's going to happen with that first interview? You winnow it down to 1 or 2, and then those people will be interviewed by the whole board?
Well, we won't know until we do the interviews.
Yeah.
Then we'll know. After we do the interviews, the plan is whoever, if any of them come forward to a second interview, it will be with the full board.
Okay,
But first, we have to have the first interview
Right.
to see if we want to bring them to the
see if we
second,
want to do a second interview with them.
right?
Okay,
So,
right. Okay.
that's the intent.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, what's the plan for the timing of checking references? Is that going to be between the first and second interviews? Okay.
Yep.
One of those folks that are being called in, on their application, they checked the box, not willing to move. Was that an error on their part?
Ooh, I didn't see that.
That was the one.
One of the ones
I saw
from
that.
Minneapolis said not willing to move. I think it was one from
I
Minneapolis.
think it was the one, no, I think it was the one from over on the range someplace. He was the one that was working for, anyway, I saw the same thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I didn't know if that was a mistake. I don't know why they would send in an application if they weren't willing to move.
We'll double check that.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I don't think it's any of the 3
Mhm.
No.
I
that
don't
we
think
have
so.
scheduled for Friday,
Okay.
so. Okay, anything else on the recruitment process? Other than, I'm so excited I can hardly sleep at night. For real.
It's been a great response, good response.
All right, then, this item will be a little bit more discussion for all of us together. On the last page of the packet that we received in our email, James had sent out a request for all board members to send him items to be placed on future agendas of this board. And I think our concept with this list is to review them, maybe prioritize them, decide which would come before a executive director is on board, or which would best wait until we have that person. You know, is it some of it that's strictly board business? So, I don't know if you have any.
Well, no, I want to thank folks who did supply suggestions for agenda items. You know, this topic is so big, And there are so many things that do need to happen, some of which clearly are shorter-term actions, others which are longer-term actions. There is a lot this board can be doing before the hiring of the ED. And I know there's been interest, I know several of you have expressed an interest in getting the ball rolling on the different kinds of projects or collecting data, what have you. And so, and I guess, you know, that we need to recognize too, that without an executive director, our bandwidth is somewhat limited, but there are things, I know that you all are willing to participate in the work. And then we also have other folks in the community who are participating in the Community Leadership Committee, Housing Work Group. We have the other folks who applied to sit on this board. There are a lot of folks who are interested in contributing toward a solution to our housing challenges. And so there are things we can be doing short term. And I think the idea here was just to have a conversation about what some of those near-term actions could be in preparation for the hiring of the ED, and then also identifying some longer-term actions that we may want to take. One thing that's really clear is that, you know, we're going to need to develop a community housing strategy. And that's a big project, and that's going to require the involvement of a lot of folks. But that's something that I think pretty clearly the executive director would need to be the point person on.
Yep.
But, you know, we can start sort of laying the foundation for that work among this board. And so I guess I just, you know, invite folks to share their thoughts about how to get that rolling.
Well, I'll offer a thought, which is that I think that there's a kind of a line of demarcation between those items that are about educating ourselves and identifying discussing the problem, documenting the problems, documenting the challenge, and those that are about developing a strategy, developing plans, and how we're going to deal with that. And to me, that would be, in my mind, sort of pre and post the ED. Yeah, the ED doesn't have to be involved in the first set of things, where we are, you know, reaching out to the community, trying to get more information about, you know, how do we prioritize the problem? How do I identify and describe and then prioritize different parts of the problem? And then after the ED is on board, then I think it's, you know, we can collectively develop a strategy and talk about how, you know, what's the most effective things, how do we prioritize action items and put together a plan for that. So to that end, I had suggested some, you know, I think that we could use this time when we're meeting to include 1 or 2 speakers per meeting to simply inform us. I mean, so, you know, bring in a realtor to see what they're seeing in the way of local housing availability and prices, bring a developer to talk about their experience in trying to develop affordable housing, whether that's worked or hasn't worked. You know, just to try to, there's a lot of people in the community that have expertise that certainly I don't have. And so, you know, I think that that would be time well spent to, in the time between now and when the ED comes in, just to have speakers basically come into it so we could learn.
So, just in response to that, Chris, when I was at the EDA, I did speak to a couple of realtors, and they said that winter is a good time to try to get together with them because it's a little bit slower. So, and I think there's some kind of I don't know if it's a super formally organized group, but there is some realtors that work together and talk to each other about matters of mutual interest. I'd be happy to reach out to a realtor and see if there's a time and a place. If we could get some of them maybe to come to our next meeting, or I'm going to talk about something else here in a little bit about if we want to think about meeting a little bit more frequently, maybe having some workshops between our board meetings. So I will reach out to some realtors and get some ideas about how we could get with them.
And I think that the information that Bill provided, you know, it did include some, at that regional workshop, did include some data, some good data on housing trends for the Arrowhead region overall. So,
Yeah.
that was a good start. I don't, so we can decide on whether the priority is to go beyond that to really zero in on Cook County and see what the trends are here. I think, but I'm also interested to, see, I don't know who it is that owns the Section 8 housing that exists in Cook County now, but I'd be interested to find out a little bit more about what their plans are for that housing, whether there's opportunities to expand that, or whether there's, and if not, why not?
Yeah, there's 2 or 3
Yeah, I think this,
complexes that have Section 8, and I used to know all the contacts, but I don't know that I can whip them out of my memory. But we can certainly find them and try to schedule that.
yeah, and I'm happy to take the lead on any of that in terms of finding and inviting folks to come join the meeting.
That'd be great. Do you want to do that? Look
I'll
for
do
those
that, yeah.
Section 8?
And actually, I can tell you, I think Bill Gabler has already done a little bit of digging on that.
Right, I know, he knew him off the top of his head. So.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
So he'd be a good place to start, I think.
good.
Do you think we could try to get those for our next meeting, the Section 8 people and the real estate people? Do you think that's a possibility?
I think it should be. I think it's a good goal.
Okay.
Possible. Another thought that I think could be something to do perhaps soon, even before maybe before we know who the ED is going to be here, is a conversation with the EDA, whether it's with Beth on our meeting agenda or with a joint meeting with the EDA board to talk about how the two boards are going to work together and what's the transition going to be like when we have a staff person, kind of taking the lead on housing things. Beth, I don't know, how do you think we should plan to talk about that with you and the EDA board?
Well, I had a conversation with Howard and Pat yesterday kind of about that. And we're kind of seemingly in a holding pattern of like what the strengths of the new ED will be and how they're going to marry with the strengths of this with my strengths. And then also what kind of opportunities do we have to work on things for each other as well. So there's just kind of like, what are we going to be good at is kind of what we would like to either make a list of or get together and hash it out or just back and forth it out. But my gathering was that we need to play to everybody's strengths on the boards and whoever comes on.
So is it your sense that the EDA would rather wait until we have the executive director and then begin that dialogue? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think that there was some interest in board training, and so if that was maybe before somebody came on, that would be okay, I think. But generally, yeah.
Okay. All right. Good to know. And in terms of board training, in our last meeting with the Minnesota Housing Partnership about board training, we did agree to pencil in April 20th as a time for a training for this board and the EDA board and maybe the Grand Marais Public Utilities folks and Planning Commission Grand Marais, because they're starting to talk a lot about housing stuff within the city limits. And so I reserved space at higher ed for 3 to 5 p.m. That would be the date of our regular board meeting in April. So that April 20th, 3 to 5 p.m. at Cook County Higher Ed, with an option to participate in person, and they can do the hybrid. They can do the Zoom or the Owl camera or whatever their equipment, but they're really good at incorporating both people that are in the room and people that are attending virtually. So, more to come about that. I don't know that we were planning to do any other training before that. We didn't pin anything, right? We had a lot of ideas about it, but we didn't. Is that correct? Am I remember that correctly?
What is that training? What's the topics of that training?
Well, that's to be determined.
Okay.
We've got a long list of things, so
All right,
we're going to keep talking about
okay.
that. What would be the most valuable to the most number of people? So, Minnesota Housing Partnership, we have a list. I think, did we share that list with the board? I don't know if we did. We can, right?
Did we? I don't recall. Sorry.
I don't think we shared it with the board. The list, okay, so we'll do that. So the group that's kind of talking about this with Minnesota Housing Partnership, it's James and Mike Roth and Beth, who have been working with the Minnesota Housing Partnership under that memorandum of understanding for more than a year. And now I've been sitting in on the last few meetings as the chair here. And the 4 or 5 of us together created a list of topics that could be considered for training. So we'll share that with everyone. Can you do that? You want me to do
I
that?
certainly will.
Can you do it? Okay.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I can't do it. Okay. So then, when you see the list of potential topics for training, you can add to it if you have ideas, or, tell us what you think is the most important thing that you'd like to learn first, second, third. You can help us plan that menu. All right? Okay. Anything to jump in at this point and with regard to all this?
Yeah, while Beth is here, maybe she could just answer some questions about if there is actually, is there EDA held property in the county that it could be viable to do something like, what was it called, Rebuild Duluth did, where we could just accept proposals for a use of that? I mean, if it's just sitting stagnant, I don't know what's out there, so that's why I'm asking.
As far as I know, the EDA land, EDA owns the business park.
That's it?
That's his, yeah.
So
There's some lots that are part of the business park that aren't up within the business park. They're along the Gunflint Trail. And those, there's 2 lots. So as you're going up the new entrance to the Gunflint Trail and it goes around the curve, the law enforcement center's on your left. On this side, there's a big drainage ditch, if you can picture about where that is on the hillside. So there's 2 lots, one above and one below that drainage ditch, that have been sort of historically discussed as potential for multifamily.
Sure.
While I was at the EDA, we tried a couple of times to get developers of assisted living to come and do that kind of multifamily, and those projects didn't pencil out, so they didn't work. But before that, the city council did talk about that might be a good place for some. So I don't know what the EDA is, I'm not speaking for the EDA, I'm just sharing some history.
And maybe I was mistaken, I had seen what looked like quarter-acre lots in the west side of Grand Marais at the end of West 2nd Street, and those could have just been left over and maybe not viable lots.
Oh, where the one roof, where the Nordic Star?
Yeah, on the south side of West 2nd Street, where West 2nd Street terminates into the woods there, there was a couple, we could probably bring
The
up
EDA
tax map
doesn't
pretty
own
quick.
that.
Okay,
One Roof does have some land available where their development, the Nordic Star development, on the north side of West 2nd Street.
right.
There's enough land there, I can share this, there there have been some, preliminary drawings, no engineering or anything, hadn't gotten to that point, but there's room there. They were talking at one time that the next step there could be 4 fourplexes, like the ones that were built in Lutzen, on that land in Grand Marais. Then they talked about the potential that if someone was interested, they would perhaps, it'd be in their best interest to sell that land and let someone else develop it, because it's difficult for them with their crew and their location in Duluth.
Right.
Their people didn't sign up to work in Grand Marais, they signed up to work in Duluth. So that's a conversation that we can have.
Yeah, and where I'm going with this is, to me, land seems to come first. It's the only thing they're not making more of in the area. So that's, like, that seems like the first step in a critical path to build housing is find and secure the land, so.
Right?
And Chris, on that note, so the county does have a number of tax forfeited parcels
Sure.
that are in various locations around the county. We do not currently have a policy on the disposition of those parcels. And so at the March Committee of the Whole meeting, County Assessor Bob Thompson and Brady Powers and I will be bringing forward information about the creation of a policy to address tax forfeited parcels. We'd like to, and it's going to be, well, I don't want to get too far ahead of the game, but it's going to be very much related to the context in which those parcels currently sit. There may be some that are really appropriate for some kind of residential development, or others that wouldn't be appropriate for that. Some will have, conservation value, others may not. But we do have some, and people have suggested that the county should be looking at this as an opportunity to increase the availability of housing, and we agree with that. I think that's something that we're really interested in doing. And so bringing forward a recommendation for a policy to put tax forfeited properties back on the tax rolls in some instances, or kind of allocating those for recreational purposes or what have you, is something that we're going to be focusing on.
James, do you happen to have the date and time for that committee as a whole meeting in March?
I can tell you, Chris, it will be, let me see here. So it'll be the third Wednesday of the month.
Okay.
So that would be March 15th, and those meetings start at 10:30 a.m.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
And those are not broadcasted?
they are broadcast.
They are broadcasted, so we can watch it? Okay, I couldn't remember if you were doing.
March 15th, 10:30 a.m.?
Yeah,
Correct.
okay.
Yep.
And they're open to the public, but no comment? Is that how they're run?
That's correct. Yeah, it's just a work session for the county board
Yeah, okay.
to receive information and ask questions about things that may appear on a future agenda.
That's great. Not to put you on the spot, but do you have any idea how many parcels there are?
I don't have that information at hand, Mary.
Okay.
But we'll have that. That's kind of
That's
going to
part
be,
of what you're
that's
getting
going to be
ready.
the starting point of the conversation. Is
Okay.
here's what the universe of possibilities is, and,
Cool.
yeah,
And does the school district still own land other than?
it does. It has a bunch of parcels north of the Gunflint here in
Uh-huh.
town. Yep.
Yes, and I have had conversations with Megan Myers,
Uh-huh.
and she was really enthusiastic about exploring whether there was something the school district could do with some of that land to help address housing needs, and then, then COVID, and
Yeah.
so.
Who was it that you were speaking
Her
with?
name is Megan Myers, and she's the principal
Uh-huh.
at the campus here in Grand Marais,
Yeah.
the 166. And also, the One Roof also has more property where the apartments were built in Lutzen that is also available. Of course, being on city water and sewer is a big help to a project, as you know.
Right.
And speaking of contractors, we have a contractor at the table who
Right.
has some knowledge about housing projects and affordability and all of that in what you're doing, and I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, so right now, we have 2 single-family homes that are completed and occupied in Lutzen at the Mink Ranch, which was a development started 20 years ago, and it just didn't gain momentum. It fizzled out and had a lot of issues. One of the biggest issues was the sewer system. It's a wetland system, not a standard mound system, and required a lot of continuing maintenance. That was neglected somewhere in that 20-year span, and it took a lot of work over a couple of years to get that back into compliance so we could keep building. The first house we built down there just sold this winter. We closed in January. And we have another one framed up and a 4th one that we just started framing walls today. That's actually where I came from. So by the end of this winter season, probably June, July, we'll be ready for occupancy with 2 more down there.
Are you selling them?
I-
That's your intent?
I'd sell them, I'd rent them.
Rent
They're
them?
gonna be occupied either way. We have a waiting list for rentals. And they're not listed on the MLS, but there's some realtors that are aware, and there's, word of mouth. That's how the first one sold. Took 4 years, but it was occupied this whole time. They were, all of them so far have been occupied within 15 days of issuing the certificate of occupancy. They were rented before they were completed. There's 2 more we can build out in that area. That development was originally made for 10 houses. The sewer system was sized for 15. There was an expiration on 5 of the lots, so now they're outlot now. So over the next couple of years, we plan to build out the last 2 of the 10. That works pretty well. The reason it worked in the arrangement was that the property owners, so far 2 separate property owners, were willing to do a contract with me to subordinate the lot to be able to finance the construction. And then once the construction was complete, they were refinanced along with sweat equity and closing out the contract and the construction loan for a conventional commercial mortgage on the houses. And this has worked several times over now. So when I think of property that could be, say, just kind of put out for proposals, that's something that without inserting cash necessarily, the best proposal could be picked. And if there was a property that the county or city was willing to, no risk, no reward, you'd have to take a risk on it. But if you could subordinate it so a private builder could finance construction without having to come up with that large lump sum to get going, it could work the same way.
Can you just explain to me what the subordination of that?
Yeah, it means the property is collateralizing the loan. So it
Okay.
puts a bank in first position, the contract holder in second position, and then the builder or developer is on the hook for everything, of course.
Okay.
Yep. So the other project that we completed is east of Grand Marais, about 1.5 miles. It was formerly Hillhaven Assisted Living. And we bought that, the royal we, that's just how I talk, and my team, of course, naturally, but on contract for deed, and the property was subordinated, so put up as collateral to finance the remaining balance of a mortgage, and I put up all my machines and random rusty trucks for collateral for a line of credit to be able to build out the remodel to turn that building, it's about 4,500 square feet, into 6 individual apartments. And so it's an efficiency, 2 2-bedrooms, and 3 one-bedrooms. So, and they're all, but the efficiency is very small, less than 300 square feet, but otherwise the apartments are between 700 and 1,000 square feet.
Right.
So, everybody has lake view, and everybody has parking, and everybody has running water, heat, all that good stuff. So, the biggest question people ask that ties into this is this buzzword of affordable.
Yeah.
And
All right.
had I had to cash flow any of these projects, I could not afford them. It took trust on the part of the property owners and trust on the part of banks to finance, and then me not sleeping at night, sweating bullets, and getting it all done. So from that standpoint, that's where affordability comes in. I mean, now that the dust has settled and they're occupied, all the tenants, even you could certainly, we could ask them and take a survey of my former and current tenants, but everybody seems to be able to pay the bill, so I would say it's affordable. That seems to be the definition of affordable, so.
So is it, this is really helpful. And you'd said before that, like, if, well, I guess I'm curious about what's the constraint for scaling that up to continue?
I don't think there is none. There's no scalability-wise. You know, somebody would need to put together a pro forma that says this property has enough value to collateralize this scope of work.
Okay.
Otherwise, I don't think there's a limit on that.
Is there a need for other subsidized financing from the federal level or the state level, or is this is not something, this is pretty independent of that?
Yeah, there's no subsidy. Interest.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's,
So.
You haven't acquired any subsidies,
I have not.
but those things are available to help with this kind of
Right,
project.
they certainly could be, and I think there's probably scenarios where, you know, arrangement where the property is collateralized for construction loan, and then the numbers don't quite jive, and you kind of need something to fill in the gaps, bridge a certain percentage ratio gap for private financing. That's where subsidy could really come in.
You know, there's a couple things that, one of the things that, the difficulty of scaling up is that you have a real advantage in that you're long-term in the community and you have lots of relationships. What I heard you saying was that there's a relationship between you and the bank and the property owner.
Right.
And that act of trust is really tough to do with outside influences, so to speak, with outside builders, outside financial institutions, that sense of knowing who you are and where you live and what you're capable of.
Right.
The other thing that was interesting to me is that it hadn't occurred, affordable housing, I'm always thinking of the purchaser. What I'm hearing from you is that, is it affordable for the builder? Can the builder afford it? And how you got around that bump in the road is by subjugating the land value, which is smart.
Right.
And that's something that we really need to think about in terms of these other the folks that hold land in the county. That's really a very smart thing that you did. So congratulations.
Yeah,
Real
thank
smart.
you.
Chris, one thing I really like about what you described is that even though it's a fairly small project, it provided a variety of housing. It wasn't just like 20 one-bedroom apartments. It was
Right.
some one-bedrooms, it was a two-bedroom, it was an efficiency. And I think that kind of approach is going to be really important to us moving forward, because we have families living here, we have single folks living here. The needs are varied, and I think your approach was really smart, recognizing that needs vary and providing a product that can fit those different needs. That's the article, Mary, that you shared from Telluride, where they did a housing project, and it was single-family homes with rental, multifamily rental housing, with even tiny homes. I mean, there are a lot of folks who, upon moving to Cook County, they just want to get a foothold here, and they don't need a mansion. They just want a place where they can be warm and So I mean, I'm really thinking about the solution to this problem consisting of a variety of different kind of options. It's not just one thing.
The other thing along with that variety that you're speaking of, that Zoom meeting that we were on, the gentleman in Duluth that did this, I think it was a homeless thing they bought over some hotel. It was a fascinating delivery. The thing that really surprised me in his was how difficult it was to get it occupied, and that the real stumbling block ended up, and I think he was surprised too, is getting people qualified to move off the streets into these homeless, into these small apartments. And I don't know what you went through, Chris, but I think with government agencies, there is certainly a factor of crossing all the Ts and dotting the Is and waiting on great lengths of time and stuff. So that's one source of revenues coming in, one way to build. The way that you're doing it, it might be more immediate.
It is. It absolutely is. It's more efficient, and that is, just to be perfectly honest, that's why I took those paths I took. Looking at those projects I talked about, I had looked at possibilities for subsidy from various sources, grants and revolving loans and different things, and it didn't fit with the timeline. And so if I was going to stretch that timeline or the planning process out to accommodate any of that additional help, then the project was no longer feasible. It was like, how do we make this happen, from groundbreaking to occupancy in the shortest amount of time is actually the most cost-effective for the whole project too. So.
Right, and I think that the audience for your projects is a little bit different than that hotel, the motel in Duluth.
Yeah.
Those were literally homeless people
Yeah.
living on the street
Yeah.
where,
Yeah.
so it, a little different, but yeah, I've heard of more than once that kind of project being done, and I don't know that we have any motels around that are prime for that kind of renovation. There's been a little bit of talk around the last couple of years, but I don't know if those ever went anywhere, but.
Well, and I want to point out, so considering if you create a large volume, say you renovate a hotel or motel, and the only viable thing for that large volume of building is efficiencies, what happens to that specific location if it's all the low-income efficiency rentals?
Right.
The best, and this is clear by our community and other communities, the best thing is to mix, to have an efficiency next to a 3-bedroom with a family, and then next door you have a single-family home, and maybe you have, mixing that up is really the healthiest thing for.
Yes, and I don't know if you're all familiar with the in terms of affordability for the renter or the purchaser, the standard for how you figure that for a person is like when you go to the bank, they don't want your mortgage to be more than 30% of your income because it's too hard to pay the mortgage then. So the same thing, rent and mortgage should be 30% of your income. So, for some of our folks here who are single people with some sort of entry-level position, that's not very much money.
No.
The 30% of what they make.
Right.
And then for you to build something for them to rent, it doesn't, there's a big gap.
There is, yeah.
So, that's,
Another thing too is that, obviously over the past couple of years, we've seen the cost of building, the hard costs
yeah.
are just growing
Okay.
crazy. But another thing is I'll speak for myself, but as builders, we now know how to build to a next level of performance and efficiency. So things that exist and might be affordable in one fashion that were built 20 or 30 years ago were built to a certain standard of performance. And so now, because we know better, codes have changed. They're really slow to change, but energy codes and some other things, we know how to build to these higher standards of performance, so naturally those things cost more. What is not really catching up to that is financial institutions and appraisers, they're starting to, but being able to put the value amortized over longer periods and include what it costs to own and operate a building.
Yeah.
So, if you can create a building that you're paying pennies on the dollar to heat and keep the lights on, you have to be able to factor that in, and it's not always the case, so.
Yeah, I remember Fannie Mae for a while had a mortgage program that was designed to accommodate that and allow you to put more money down take out a Fannie Mae loan for the 95% of the value of the property if it met certain Energy Star standards. But I don't know what's happened to that program.
It seems like the builders are ahead of the curve. On our place that we built, we put a rain screen on it, and we used the hurricane codes for the tie downs for changing weather patterns. And my insurance company doesn't care about that at all. We put metal siding on, which is the best you can have for hail. Minnesota has the worst hail claims of any state in the union. So vinyl siding and inexpensive shingles get beat up in hailstorms, right? So the payouts are enormous. So we put metal siding and metal roof on, not only for fire prevention with a Firewise program, but also against hail. And my insurance company doesn't care at all. They don't care about that. So they're insuring it the same as if somebody had inexpensive vinyl siding and cheap shingles on it and had all the brush right up against the walls. They're insuring it the same. So the lending institute, I mean, FEMA is still their flood maps are 20 years old. They're not responding to current weather changes at all. So it would be one of those things as building that it might be nice to nudge on some of those institutions when we're building this stuff. If there's, I mean, that's a tangential thing but it really, some of those institutions need to get up to speed on it. And builders are ahead of the curve on that.
Yeah, I don't know if you've participated in those annual workshops that are done in Cook County for builders to learn energy efficient.
Some of them we have to go to if we can get continuing education.
Continuing ed,
Local,
yeah.
yeah.
I understand that they've been very well attended, and I've heard from people that have gone to them that they're really helpful and informative and definitely worth the time. And
it's funny about those in our local. We've got amazing contractors locally.
Yeah.
So the thing about that is those workshops, they're for continuing education, and they're the strict parts of code are the minimum prescriptive codes, right? And so a lot of the times contractors in those classes here are stumped because we've already been pursuing best practice, and they're trying to teach minimum standards. So, which is goes into another point that locally we don't have a building official. So we have a permit process for land use. We don't have a building official. So this could come full circle and say if we see a solution from within or outside our community that looks really cheap to get off the ground, it could end up being really expensive to own. And if it's going to be held either privately or by the community, I'd rather pay that cost up front than have to do it later. So.
Yeah, I think that's important to remember that. I don't know if you read the news about Brad Pitt's project after Hurricane Katrina, what happened to those houses. It's just really unfortunate. Really unfortunate. Some of them have bulldozed. So I think that's really important to remember in this climate to build well up front. It's cheaper in the long run.
We're having that same conversation in regard to the county's capital improvement plan. If you try to skimp up front, you're going to pay in the long term.
Yeah.
And we've seen that with the way we've done things as an organization. So,
Yeah. Good.
and Chris, I'm really glad to hear you mention that because keeping housing affordable depends on making sure that homes are energy efficient. Because that cost of heating in the winter and even increasingly cooling in the summer. I mean, we had some hot days last summer, and this isn't a place where people typically have central air, but maybe that day is coming. So it just makes it all the more important.
So we have, thank you for
It's really
very
helpful.
much. Clearly, we have a long list of.
They're just great ideas.
So one thing that came up since our last meeting was this thought has been on my mind a fair amount of time recently, that we are soon to have, an executive director who this board will lead or guide or manage or whatever we want to call our role with that person. And we barely know each other. And we really don't have a, like if someone said, what's your top priority? What's your vision? What's your, we can't walk the talk because we haven't had the talk. So I want to wonder if everyone is agreeable to scheduling, like the county board does, the committee of the whole that meets in between the regular board meetings, and it's a work session. And I want to find out if you are all available and interested, maybe a week from now or 2 weeks from now, somewhere in the next, before the next monthly meeting, to get together and create an opportunity for that kind of a work session, not sitting at this table in a line, sitting in a circle or a square where we can all look at each other and see each other and talk about, what is our vision. Until we know who the executive director is, we can't say specifically, on the first day, we want you to do this, on the second day, we want you to do that, but just at least have some broad discussion about where the person is going to begin to do what, regardless of who it is. There's some value, I think, in, we can't lead because we haven't created a path. So that is a question for all of you. I'm thinking it could be like Wednesday the 2nd or Wednesday the 9th. Maybe the same time of the day. I don't know if you need to be pounding nails longer in the day.
If we start at 3, that means I'm home in time for dinner, so,
That's a good thing.
yeah.
Okay.
I'm available. I guess I'm not sure yet what's the meeting gonna, how's the meeting gonna be structured? Is it gonna be just introductions? Are we gonna try to share ideas? Is it gonna be unstructured and just?
No, it'll be more structured before we get there, but right now it's not exactly clear in my mind. But one thing is kind of a team building icebreaker, get to know you kind of thing, which doesn't have to be hours of time, but just something. I don't know what that even, I've done.
Coffee and cookies available?
Coffee. Yeah. Okay, Chris is coming. But then,
good.
and I think maybe if there's value inviting Beth or any EDA board members, that might.
I think that'd be good.
Because just to begin to scratch the surface of that conversation, what does the EDA have going on? Where do we fit in with anything that's beginning, middle, or and then right, Chris. Then more like we created that work group that was working with Minnesota Partnership, Minnesota Housing. We created a work plan for the executive director for year 1. When we submitted the budget request to the county board, but we should look at that again. It's a year old.
Yeah.
Some things have changed.
Yeah.
So we should. That might be an important way, a good way to without reinventing it. Here, this is what we thought we wanted to accomplish. Are there things we want to pull out of there that we want to highlight as top priority? And also, I think it's important, in the first year, it's going to be very difficult for an employee of the HRA to produce measurable results. How many units of housing did you build in the first year? Probably not a lot of housing, right? But so some other ways for us to tell that person, this is what we hope you can accomplish in the first year. Get somewhere down this path towards some, I mean, maybe we probably can't get anything built in the first year, but we certainly can be making progress towards building. Looking at parcels.
Secure land.
Right, looking at land, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, what do you think about?
One of the things about not building a house in the first year is that you don't build the house the first day, well, start pounding nails, then it's done in increments. So there's pieces of building a house.
Right.
And you're talking about land as the first piece.
Yeah.
Then there's other pieces that can stage for actually getting out on the job site and cutting boards and pounding
Correct.
nails.
We call it building on paper.
There we
So
go, yep.
even like custom home clients, a lot of times we're building on paper anywhere from 6 to 12 months before groundbreaking.
Right.
So that when we do break ground, we can, doesn't always go so smooth, but you keep
Right.
that overall time frame as short as possible because it was built on paper, so.
Right.
Yeah, and and then there's the other overall conversation as well, is like, are we expecting the HRA to dive in and acquire land and be the builder of a public housing project? Or are we expecting the HRA to find contractors who will, like, here, we found a piece of land, what can you do with it? I think that has more potential to go forward faster than if we try to raise a bunch of millions of dollars to all of a sudden do a public housing project. We don't have any history, no one has any reason to trust us with their grant money. We've got to accomplish something and set a track record a little bit at least, I think, before we can go that route. But, so it's those kinds of conversations that I think it would be great, like, we've been here almost an hour and we've had some great conversation here today, and I think knowing that we're going to sit down for a couple of hours and have this kind of, because some of you haven't even had a chance to talk yet, so, that's what I'm thinking, is just
I think it's
sharing
great.
thoughts, sharing the
Yep.
vision, being a little more prepared, so on the first day of our new employee's career as the HRA director for Cook County, and they say, what should I do? We know what.
Yeah, we got an answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you want to calendar it, Mary? What do you? What-
Yeah, I'm good on both of those.
You're looking at the 23rd is the,
Oh, wait, March 9th.
Yeah, I can't do the 23rd, but I could do the 9th. I'm sorry, the 2nd.
Yep, and now I'm realizing that I can't do that. How
Yeah.
about the 16th is our next meeting, shoot.
What about the 4th or the 11th?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a
Right.
Wednesday.
Wouldn't
doesn't have to be a
necessarily
Wednesday.
have to be.
I've got problems with both of those dates, unfortunately.
Fridays probably aren't the best.
How about the 7th? It's a Monday.
I'm coming back from
Yeah.
Chicago.
Okay, one more try.
How about Tuesday, March 1st? Anybody?
That works for me.
It's open for me.
Yep.
I will be gone, but.
And I will be gone.
Done.
Oh, it's
Okay.
AMC thing going on for you
Okay,
guys.
all right.
Monday, the 28th, did we try that?
That works for me.
It works.
It's open for me.
No, you guys are already gone on that day. What are you doing
I'm
tomorrow?
a bit busy.
Probably more important for you guys to set than
Yes.
it is for us, because yeah, that's just, you're more important to make sure you guys
Question, if it's
make the decisions.
semi-informal but we're all there, it's a quorum, will it be recorded or
It-
will be?
Can we do that? Can we sit over there and still,
I don't think, I mean, it has to be publicly noticed. I don't know that it necessarily has to be broadcast. I mean, the EDA meetings are not, they're
Right.
public meetings, so, yeah.
yeah, and we won't be making any decisions?
Sure.
Anything that we talk about, we would bring it back to the board meeting and then
Yeah.
vote in a public way?
Yeah,
We might say we're going to vote on this, but we won't vote at that day.
yeah.
Right? We'll bring it forward. Okay, so,
Where's Troy?
So is that the 28th then that we're looking at?
well, or next week, is next week too soon to add things to calendars?
Fine to me, fine with me.
Monday is a holiday, Tuesday, Wednesday,
I can do Monday or Tuesday or Thursday.
Okay, I can do any of those days.
Well, the courthouse would be closed on Monday.
we won't do Monday because it's a holiday.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
okay.
So Tuesday or Thursday?
Thursday.
Both of those work for me.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
Thursday I could.
Thursday?
Thursday?
Okay,
All right, let's do the 24th at 3 PM. Okay, you're okay?
I can do it.
All right. HRA, Beth, would you be able to join us?
I could, thank you.
That would be great. That would be wonderful. Okay, and what do we call this? A work session,
work session, sure.
not a board meeting, right? Is that right, James?
Yeah, a work session would be fine.
Work session?
And we said 3 to 4:30, same time?
3, yeah, let's go 3 to 5.
Okay.
Dinner will be at 5:15.
Don't fill up on the cookies.
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
You can take the leftovers home for the kids. That'll be great, and I'll give some thought to whatever is the icebreaker thing. I don't know, I've done a million of those. I'll see if I can figure out one that seems like a fun thing for us to do, and then make sure that we send out the first year work plan. Maybe you and I can collaborate on an agenda for this a little bit. I can take the first stab at it, and you can polish it up.
Yes. Just, hang on just a second.
Yep.
That may be a little bit challenging for me, but we can talk.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't mind doing it, but then you just have to send it out to everyone.
And do you want me to reserve this room?
I already have.
You have, all right, you're ahead of me.
That's what's going on over here.
And public notice?
Yep.
Yeah, we need to notice it, so I'll work on that.
Okay. Cool.
I doubt we would get a quorum, Madam Chair, from the EDA, but we might be able to invite a couple of people in and keep it easy like that.
That would be great. If you want to go ahead and invite them and let them know that we'll provide more information as soon as Mary puts it together. Yeah? Okay. All right. All right, so anything else for now on this prioritizing agenda topics? We said we were going to try to get for the next meeting, maybe the realtors and some contractors, was that the other?
Right, the other was Section 8 investors.
Oh, Section
Yeah,
8,
Section
that's
8.
right, okay. All right. And Chris, you're going to,
I'll talk to Bill.
And
about-
Bill?
See if we
Okay.
can, sounds like.
okay, and further clarification, now, we have received from James or April the contact information for all the board members, and so it is okay for board members to talk one-on-one to each other, to, like, specifically, you can talk to Bill about that,
Yeah, yeah.
right? But then you can't call someone else and someone else and someone else. Only 2 at a time can be
Okay,
in communication, because then it's not a quorum.
But the same topic, one person can't call each of the board members with the same topic, same discussion.
Right.
It's called a chain.
That's a serial
That's a
conversation.
serial conversation, and that's not
That's
allowed.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So, Cook County and Grand Marais EDA. So what I did is I just pulled up the tax parcel map. I wanted to clear up my own confusion. And this is on the, so it's listed as combined. Oops. It was at the end of West Second Street, and it's on both sides of West Second Street. Do you, does this ring it?
I
Is
bet I
that
know,
that-
but show me the,
Cedar
Yeah.
Grove part, the business part?
no, West Second Street, so the other side of town, the west side
Yeah.
of town.
And, let's see, let's get all the way in there. It would be these, and they were scattered in there. So, I wish we had a big screen I could show. This one is,
Yep.
and I believe these are, we can,
So one thing that happened when One Roof bought that property to do the Nordic Star development, the EDA purchased these little skinny strips of land along
Yeah.
the street, like the boulevard, that was basically
Okay.
what it was. Because I don't remember exactly why we bought it as opposed to One Roof, but there was something that required the process to go that way.
sure.
So we bought that, I don't know if it was tax forfeit or, I really, man, I would have to go dig in the
But
deep
that, when I
drawers.
first brought it up, some of those lots were, they're probably substandard, but not so substandard that they might not fit into the
Huh.
new zoning ordinance.
On the West Second, well, okay, I guess this is new and interesting information.
I mean, I just had to check and make sure it wasn't crazy for having seen that.
What, yeah,
I mean, maybe it's worth looking further into.
absolutely, yes, I think we can do that. Beth, we can both take a look at that and see if we can find it, or,
I'll check it out.
I mean, who knows if they are substandard? Hamilton Habitat builds pretty
Yep.
compact
Yep.
units. It
Yep.
could be, and that's why I wrote, things like that could be extremely low-hanging fruit, like, put it up, let somebody like Hamilton Habitat put a house on it, and boom, one in the books,
Yeah.
first year.
Yeah,
So-
there you go.
Just,
okay, you are gonna be the new HRA Executive Director.
You bailed awfully quickly.
No, that's great, I love
so,
that,
I mean, maybe it's not viable, but
right.
it's knowing that exists over there, we should look further into it.
Yeah, I just, in 5 years, I never was aware. I only knew that we bought the little strip boulevard lot along the street so they could
So who owns
access.
those?
Well, says Cook County and Grand Marais EDA,
Uh-huh.
so.
Okay. So you put that in the parcel finder and those came up. That's
yeah.
interesting. Wow. Okay, well, I think our county website is extremely helpful it's a really well done.
It is.
In terms of being able to find stuff like that, so we will learn more about that, for
Great.
sure.
Great.
What streets are those on? East,
West Second Street.
West Second? Okay, thanks.
Like between 8th Avenue West and 11th or 12th
Yeah.
or whatever, wherever it ends out
Yeah,
there.
and so even if they are little strips, we can't do anything with them, maybe it would be good to at least have them inventoried, so we know.
Well, yeah, let's know what it is, yeah. I wonder, yeah, that's interesting.
They're little tiny.
Okay. All right, so anything else on the agenda setting, or are we pretty well, we'll take that up when we do our little workshop?
Yeah.
and Go, okay. Then the next thing on the agenda is a report on the Northeast Minnesota Regional Housing Forum. I attended that one, and Bill, and
I did.
Lawrence,
I watched part of it, yeah.
you were on there, okay? And now they have provided links to all of the presentations and the slide, PowerPoints and all that, and I think you sent that?
Well, and the link is also part of the meeting packet for today. So if folks are watching online and would like to access those materials, you can do so by downloading the agenda.
And the link is there. So that was coordinated by the Greater Minnesota Housing Fund, which is yet another great partner that we have here in northeastern Minnesota. They provide mostly loans, but so like gap loans, if you went to the bank and you couldn't get as much, you couldn't borrow as much as you needed, then that organization is one that could do some gap financing. And after we have our executive director here, we can spend good time, everyone all together, learning all of those. I think I know them all, but it's important that I'm not the only one. So that will be a great, I don't know if anybody has anything else to share. The one other thing that came out of the Northeast Minnesota Housing Forum is, it happened at about the same time that this forum was happening. Governor Walz put in his budget proposal for this year, this legislative session, $7 billion, I think. No, the surplus is $7 billion. He put in some of the $7 billion into
For housing.
increasing the housing. And so we're going to receive, I'm waiting for it, but from Warren Hansen at the Greater Minnesota Housing Fund, those entities whose focus is housing, they're the housing advocates, he called them, they're preparing a one-pager that summarizes the talking points that we should all use in talking with legislators, writing letters to the governor, and support of the money for housing. So as soon as we receive that, we will share it broadly. That initiative is also on the legislative agenda for the Cook County Chamber of Commerce, who will be attending legislative days at the Capitol on March 7th, 8th, 9th, in that week. And I've been invited to participate. I've done that for the last 5 years, and I've been invited to come along. And so we meet with legislators and share Cook County's legislative agenda and, encourage support from senators and representatives on both sides of the aisle and both sides of the issue, just hoping to gain support for the things for our people here back home. So I will keep you updated about that as I learn more. That's really actually right around the corner. So anything else on the Northeast Minnesota Housing Forum? It's worth watching some of the presentations and looking at the slideshows and stuff when you're not building houses. All right, and then we have an update on the West End mixed-use developments. James, you have something?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to14briefly mention that we discussed the two proposed developments in the West End, that is the Tofty Homestead and Sawbill Village, that are proposed for construction in the West End there in Tofty. Last fall, the county board approved tax abatements for those two projects. And that laid the foundation for both project sponsors to apply to the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency for financial assistance to make those projects go. Where we are right now, those proposals have been submitted to MHFA. And I believe it's April that we're supposed to hear back on the outcome. One thing to note is that the total funding available is about $4 million, but they received almost $19 million worth of proposals. So this funding round is going to be very competitive. And so it's unclear at this point whether one or both of those projects would receive assistance from MHFA, but from the county's perspective, if the projects are to move forward, we have to have a development agreement with the two developers. And one thing that the board has made clear from the beginning of this discussion is that it wants to make sure that at least some portion of this housing is available to people who live and work full-time in Cook County. It's not to say that some of it couldn't be used for folks who are, for example, seasonal employees, but we know that there's a need for housing for people who are nurses at the hospital and teachers in the school district and so on. And so the development agreements will include some kind of language that speaks to that desire on the part of the board. And I know that the One Roof project that was done in Lutzen has some language that we could use for that purpose. That basically says, this housing is for people who live and work full-time in Cook County, and so that expectation is understood by everyone.
Yep. And I know that expectation is understood by those developers, but I also know that they've been told by, and Beth, help me out here, the Minnesota Housing Finance has to operate under the Minnesota or Federal Fair Housing Standards Act or whatever it's called, and that says you can't put any restrictions on who lives in the housing, that it has to be available to everyone. And Sarah Bunn, who is the manager of the grant program at Minnesota Housing Finance, I don't know, I was in a meeting with her and I heard her say, I know that this is really sort of a, I don't remember the word that she used, but it's kind of like a conflicting, it's called the Greater Minnesota Workforce Housing Grant Program, but there's language in the criteria that says you can't discriminate who lives in these houses because of the fair, it's public money invested in the project. So between the county and Sarah Bunn and the EDA and the developers, everybody needs to work together to find the solution to those opposing must-haves. And in the case of the One Roof, the One Roof apartments didn't have any Minnesota Housing Finance funds. It had Greater Minnesota Workforce Housing Funds, but it was when the program was still under deed before it went to Minnesota Housing Finance. And what was resolved there was the priority was for full-time year-round people to rent those apartments. So they needed to be advertised on the open market for full-time year-round people. And if after advertising, any apartments were left not rented, then employers could rent them and they could put seasonal workers in them. But only after they had been advertised on the open market. And so now some of those leases are coming up that are in that situation, that employers have them, and One Roof and the rental management company will be putting them on the open market and advertising them for rent, and if nobody rents them full-time year-round, then the businesses can again use them for seasonal. So I don't know if that will be something that, so there needs to be a meeting of the minds of the county and Sarah Bunn and whoever else should be there, the developers and Beth, and I'm happy to sit in if you want me to, or however, because that all needs to be resolved even maybe before April, when you know if any of those funds are gonna come this way, so that if anybody does get any of that money, you're ready to hit the ground running, and it's, otherwise it could take a couple months to negotiate that again, so. It's complicated.
And so, I know that fair housing laws obviously stipulate that you cannot discriminate based on protected classes, right? So like, I can't decide I'm only going to rent to women, or I can't decide I'm going to rent only to people who are part of a certain religious group. But if you have a requirement that doesn't discriminate based on a protected class, for example, working working people are not a protected class.
Mm.
And so if we said, we want people, we want this housing to go to people who are full-time residents and work in the county,
Mhm.
I'm not sure that would necessarily run afoul of those laws. So I agree. I mean, that's something that we do need to clarify.
That what needs to be clarified is,
Yeah.
what does it mean? And I see Beth has her hand up.
To muddy the waters even a little bit more,
Oh, good.
Please do.
there was a certain stipulation where the EDA did not have to submit an affirmative fair housing marketing plan. But everybody else who was, because they were not a municipality, or the other people who had applied for the MHFA grant that we applied for, workforce housing, had to submit an affirmative fair housing marketing plan. And so I imagine, I'm thinking ahead of time that the EDA, in giving out those funds, will have to make sure that they are affirmative, that the apartments are affirmatively marketed towards a certain class, which just happens to be the people who are here anyway, because we're not really that diverse here. But we'll have to have an affirmative fair housing marketing plan, or they will have to have a plan to affirmatively market. So basically, it's on them, right?
Mhm.
You as the county could probably say, well, where is that, and how are you doing that? And the EDA will have to check in and enforce it somehow.
And just, thank you, Beth, for everyone's understanding, the EDA was actually the applicant for those grants on behalf of the developments. That's why Beth is in the middle of all of that conversation as well, just so you know that.
And we're.
They helped with the data to complete that application, but the EDA actually submitted it. So Chris and then Lawrence.
Just, so, from my understanding, you mentioned that if the funds are received, then there is a development plan worked out between that would be between the EDA and the developer?
It would actually be between the county and the developer, and
Okay.
and it's part of the whole abatement process.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a separate, there's tax abatement
it's-
from the county, and then there's grant funds.
Okay, so the tax abatement, so that development agreement wouldn't touch on who they can sell to and who they can rent to. That's not the right vehicle for that.
Well, no, it actually could, and it was our expectation that it would in some fashion address that.
Okay.
So, right.
And I say it was our expectation, and I'm sitting here with the commissioners who haven't said anything, so I should probably shut up and ask them if they want
It
to
was
say something.
totally my expectation, if we are giving tax abatements to any developers, that it is for full-time, year-round apartments.
Got it.
And the developer can accept that,
Mhm.
or they cannot, their choice.
Okay. Great, thanks.
Yeah, that was, I believe, that was the conversation, yeah. Commissioner Sullivan, then we'll go, if you have
That
anything.
same priority, the
Same,
priority is
yeah.
for workforce housing for people that live and work here, yes.
Right.
So how was that, after the builder's done, how was that enforced in the decades after the builder's done? Is there a management company that then enforces that?
Well, in the case of the Lutzen housing, people, the tenants have to provide like a pay stub that
Right.
shows that they are working.
It's it's the rental management.
So that's part of
company.
the application process to rent the place?
It's in the
It's
lease.
part of the management.
Got it,
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
So that arrangement could theoretically bar people who are on disability or social security from being, I don't think.
Because
One
they're not working?
person, according to the lease at Lutzen, one
wait,
person
wait.
in the household has to be full-time employed, yes.
Right.
Yeah, that's,
Even if the income from social security or disability met the income criteria for the,
That's a really good question, Chris. and
because I'm
I-
not sure,
Yeah.
I ran into this from
Yep.
creating my apartment building. I don't
That would be a
I
protected
don't know that
class.
you could actually, you can
Yeah.
actually do that.
Right,
So-
right. Yeah, so it's something that we all need to learn and understand and work
Yeah.
out with all the parties that need to know what it is and discover if there's a way for those two seemingly opposite requirements to come together in a way that still enables the development to happen. You know, so,
Well, and to be clear, unless say like senior housing or disability housing was simultaneously happening, the need for those things that might be protected classes is still gonna exist, and they're members of the community, whether or not they're working at whatever establishment needs
Yep.
workers. They're members of the community, they're here, they live here, they need places to live, so
yeah.
that's my take on it.
Right, so that law might not allow the county to make it, every single unit has to be full-time year-round, you know, if somebody in one of those classes applies for an apartment, the owner.
Well, and thinking of our West End developments, there are 2 units in each facility or each building that are ADA accessible. They were built with that in mind.
Sure.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
so somehow there's a little homework for someone to do in there.
There is.
to- You know, I have been accused of being the eternal optimist, and I'm going to continue to be that person. And I think that some solution will come forward when all the right people are talking to each other about what needs to happen.
We're the right people, we're gonna be fine.
Well, we are. Everyone would just let us do this. Yeah. No, but in terms of that, you know, because this board is really not attached in any way to those projects in the West End.
Right.
They're already underway. It's between the county and the EDA and the
Right.
developers at this point.
I was just throwing in my 2 cents on that.
Yeah,
That's a
just-
good
that's good.
point.
It
That's
was
a great
path.
point.
But I think that this board should have input on that development agreement. And you provide insight that we don't know. We've never done this before. So I want this board to look this over and give advice and make sure that we're thinking of all the things that we need to think about.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Yes, we should be engaged. but
Yes.
We don't really have a horse in the race, but for the long term, we need to understand all this stuff
Yeah.
so that we don't go chasing after things and then find out like, well, that doesn't work because you got that over there, you know, like, well, then we have to learn how this all works, so.
Yeah. It seems like the West End projects could be really good training, since we're not on the hook for any mistakes we might make. It'd be a great learning opportunity for us, it seems like.
I don't know, I'm going to push it off on you.
Well, and to be clear, I mean, the point is not to try to impede these developments,
No.
but
Yes.
just to make sure that they serve community needs, because we are
Yeah.
would be applying community resources
Yeah.
to the project.
Right.
Yeah. But I
Yeah.
do think it's helpful to know ahead of time some of the bumps in the road. I was really struck with that presentation that guy in Duluth did. He was saying that to get people off the streets into these things that he had built, that they had to have a year of documented living on the streets. And he said, how do you get documentation about people that are living on the street? How do you get it? The federal government required that. How do you get a year's documentation that they're living on the street? And that was one of his biggest stumbling blocks. He was shocked by it.
Wow.
And I think I mean, we can't know everything that's coming at us, but I think it'd be really helpful Chris, you've got a heads up on some of this stuff already, and I just think that's really helpful to know ahead of time any bumps in the road, because there's gonna be some anyway that we don't foresee and can't know. Comes back to training again, I think.
All right. Well, in the last couple of minutes here, any other business for the good of the order? I'll start with Ann. Do you have anything?
I do not.
Stacy? Lawrence?
I'm just really excited for when we get our first chunk of money and buy a piece of ground.
Chris?
I don't have anything.
More for me.
James?
Nothing here.
Beth? All right, nor do I. Then, we have our next meeting scheduled for the 24th of February, a work session, not a board meeting. And then, the next regular board meeting is Wednesday, March 16th at 3 PM right here. And with that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
Chris?
Yeah.
And Chris, a second? All those in favor? Aye. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll look forward to seeing you all in a couple of weeks.
I'm gonna talk to you.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, just briefly. I got a question for you.
I just wanted to say
Might have an
I was blown away. I think